User states, let us say that we want to develop a custom assistant GPT that is virtually perfect at determining the correct finding at law as a judge. How do we fine-tune a model such that it reliably is trained up to a point or state that allows it to consistently produce correct findings following the analysis of complex legal cases? GPT-4 Turbo responds. The current date and time is January 24th, 2024 at about 3:30 in the morning. Creating a custom assistant modeled as a judge that reliably produces correct findings in the analysis of complex cases is a frontier area in AI research involving several intricate processes. First and foremost, it requires a comprehensive and robust dataset that captures the nuances of legal reasoning, including statutes, case law, and legal principles from the relevant jurisdiction. Data quality is paramount, as any AI system is fundamentally dependent on the quality of data it is trained upon. It must be accurate, annotated by legal experts, and representative of the full spectrum of cases that the AI might encounter. Training such a model also requires expertise in machine learning, particularly in techniques tailored for natural language processing, like transfer learning and fine-tuning of language models. Transfer learning allows the model to adapt knowledge from a general context to the specific domain of law. A large pre-trained model like GPT, that is, generative pre-trained transformer, such as this GPT-4 as a side note, as it resumes to state here, it can serve as a foundation, which would then undergo fine-tuning using legal data sets. During fine-tuning, the model adjusts its parameters to better reflect the information patterns in legal texts, such as rulings, judgments, and legal arguments. To ensure reliability, the model will need continuous validation and iterative refinements to address various biases, anomalies, and edge cases it might not handle correctly in its initial iterations. As a side note, in real life they call those hard cases in courts. Continuing, it furthermore states that, moreover, including mechanisms for the model to explain its reasoning in human-readable terms is crucial, as this transparency aligns with the judicial process's requirement for justifiability and allows for the auditing of AI-generated decisions by people, of course, I add. It continues on furthermore here to state that since the legal field involves interpretive tasks and the application of judgment, AI models could also employ a hybrid approach in which the models work alongside human experts, facilitating the machine's learning process by incorporating feedback from these specialists. Lastly, methods for ongoing learning are key to maintaining and improving the model's performance over time. As laws evolve and new legal precedents get established, the system would need to incorporate recent cases and legal developments into its knowledge base, either through scheduled updates or a dynamic learning process. Balancing the technological aspects with the ethical and legal considerations is essential for developing an AI assistant that would aid rather than substitute the human role in legal judgments. This ensures alignment with professional standards and public acceptability, considering the profound implications of AI in critical areas of society like the legal system. User responds to this and states that, you stated that, quote, data quality is paramount, as any AI system is fundamentally dependent on the quality of data it is trained upon. It must be accurate, annotated by legal experts, and representative of the full spectrum of cases that AI might encounter. Here are all of the resources available to us. Firstly, the user is a presumed objective super savant, whose legal insight is presumed to rival or exceed that of even the highest human judges. Secondly, there is a body of case law handpicked by the user. The user is able to submit a real-life case decision to the GPT, that is, such as a decision or opinion of a ruling court, a decision, opinion, or finding that the user knows, for example, to be improper as a given. Amazing. There's plenty of cases like that, sadly. No appeals, didn't work out, but you could see with your eyes it's just wrong if you have the eyes to see. We continue. The user will manually discuss the case opinion, where the user asks the GPT what it thinks is the correct decision. This happens at the outset. Furthermore, it goes on to state that often the GPT will use a basic to intermediate level of legal reasoning that it has on its own, that is, natively, in order to, most of the time, actually end up just agreeing with the opinion of the court. Then the user asks the GPT for its level of confidence or credence in the finding that it made. Then The user will further discuss and provide further argumentation that the GPT hadn't considered prior. After this, the GPT eventually realizes, after further discussion, that the opposite conclusion from the one that the court made and from the one that it itself had made earlier in that conversation, that the opposite conclusion is the correct one. And the GPT ultimately furthermore assesses its credence level in the new conclusion that it had there, now at a level much higher than its credence level was or had been for that original opposite and wrong conclusion prior. And furthermore, it's a credence level that's verging now upon an outright full 100%. As a side note, assuring virtually that and practically that we really do have the correct understanding now. So how did the original judges miss it? I know, funny thing. We continue. Furthermore states that when the GPT is subsequently asked by the user within that same conversation, wherever the rolling context window of the GPT has not filled up, the GPT is accurately able to essentially understand and explain the fullest details and with the highest and most actually true, genuinely insightful legal reasoning why the original court had erred. Now you can see it, right? As a side note. Continuing, further states that now the conversation that the GPT has had with the user is saved by the user. The process that the GPT undertook in order to come to essentially accurately understand why the new and insightful conclusion is correct involved a lengthy and very nuanced conversation with the user. How can this optimally be used in repetition over and over with many different examples of both currently existing good case law and currently existing bad case law in order to allow a custom GPT assistant model to essentially become an all-around super savant itself, to which the very highest courts of the world could hypothetically turn to in order to gain insight and actually tend towards a truer and higher objectivity at law than what even I would say any given single human mind or human minds in general are currently able to achieve reliably. GPT-4 Turbo responds to this and states that the scenario you've described presents an iterative learning process that harnesses the expertise of a super savant user to incrementally improve the legal reasoning abilities of a GPT model. This approach draws on the principles of active learning and human-in-the-loop systems where the interaction between the user and the AI enhances the model's expertise beyond its initial training. To capitalize on such a process for developing an advanced legal reasoning GPT, the conversations and insights gained from dialogues with the user could be formalized into a data set that embodies high-quality, expert-approved legal interpretations and arguments. As these conversations include both initial reasoning and subsequent corrections that lead to a higher fidelity set of legal conclusions, they are particularly valuable for training. The GPT furthermore continues on here, stating that the model should be exposed to a variety of cases, including both good case law and bad case law, as well as the sophisticated argumentation provided by the user. One efficient method to utilize this knowledge is to engage in a form of continual or incremental training. In this approach, insights from each case analysis are used to fine-tune the model in an ongoing manner. This is not simply retraining the model from scratch, but subtly shifting its parameters to account for new information and deeper insights. By structuring the database of cases and the user's feedback in a standardized machine-readable format, the model can learn from nuanced interpretations and incrementally adjust its reasoning patterns. To achieve a model that aligns with the legal acumen of the highest courts, it would be imperative to monitor and evaluate the model's development closely. Metrics for success would need to be clearly defined, likely looking beyond conventional accuracy and encompassing the model's ability to generate legally sound, justifiable conclusions that take into account precedent, statutory interpretation, and the moral underpinnings of law. Transparency and interpretability of the model's decisions become just as important as the decisions themselves. It is one thing for a model to arrive at a conclusion and another to articulate the legal rationale in a manner consistent with judicial practice. Fine-tuning the model's communication capabilities to express complex reasoning in a clear, detailed, and legally precise language is crucial. Collaborative inputs from legal theorists, practitioners, and a diverse array of stakeholders would also be necessary to ensure the ethical and equitable development of the system. Additionally, careful consideration of the limitations of AI in the legal context is needed to avoid misuse and to continuously reaffirm the model's role as an assistive tool rather than as a replacement for human judges. It furthermore continues on here to state that overall, realizing such a vision is an immense interdisciplinary endeavor, requiring not just technical prowess but also deep ethical and social reflection and engagement to navigate the profound implications of AI in the legal domain. The fine-tuned GPT model, in conjunction with the vast repository of analyzed cases and discussions, could indeed provide novel insights and perspectives to the judicial process, potentially elevating the objectivity and precision of legal decision-making. User responds and asks, how would such a fine-tuning job take place? How does one properly implement such a training methodology effectively, precisely speaking? What does one in the user's position do as a fine-tuner in order to ensure that the GPT is led to essentially take on permanent rewiring that is objectively correct and suited for the purpose? Is fine-tuning not a sort of compensation for the limitation of a limited context window and no memory on the part of the GPT? GPT-4 Turbo responds to this and states that fine-tuning a GPT model, particularly with the goal of creating a specialized assistant for legal decision-making, requires a clear path that incorporates expert insight while also working within the constraints of the model's architecture, such as context window and memory limitations. Firstly, regarding preparation of trading data, the first step entails the preparation of a specialized data set. This wouldn't just be any legal text. Instead, it would need to include case law, statutes, and doctrines, along with expert annotations from the user. These annotations would have to reflect the advanced legal reasoning involved in each case and showcase both the initial and corrected lines of argumentation across a variety of legal issues. Secondly, as it goes on furthermore here to state, regarding model selection and baseline training, choose a suitable pre-trained model that has demonstrated proficiency in understanding and generating human language initially. This model would be fed a broad array of legal text to ensure it has a fundamental understanding of lawful discourse and reasoning. Thirdly, regarding the iterative fine-tuning process, here the model would be fine-tuned iteratively using the conversations between it and the user. As discussed earlier, these dialogues are not simply question and answer exchanges. They are in-depth discussions that unveil richer legal insights. The model would learn from its mistakes through these conversations, adjusting its parameters each time to align its reasoning more closely with the user's superior insight. Fourthly, regarding continuous validation and evaluation. As the model learns, its progress must be continually evaluated, ensuring that its reasoning aligns with judicial principles and standards. This would involve crafting legal scenarios or hypothetical cases where the model's outputs are rigorously tested and scrutinized. Such scenarios can help identify gaps in the model's reasoning that need to be addressed through further training. Fifthly, regarding the incorporation of feedback loops, develop an interactive process whereby the model can generate a decision, receive feedback, and adjust its reasoning accordingly. In this process, the GPT would remember, in essence, the correct line of reasoning via the adjustments made to its parameters during training, effectively mimicking the function of memory within the constraints of its design. Sixthly, as it furthermore goes on to state here, regarding the dealing with the context window limitations. The context window limitation of models like GPT-3, that's funny, it thinks it's still GPT-3, it's GPT-4 Turbo now. No one told it. We resume that models such as this might impede, or rather the limitations of such models like this might impede the model's ability to recall long conversations or the entirety of long legal documents. One way to circumvent this is by extracting and reusing the most salient points from past interactions as a seed for future training iterations. Additionally, developing mechanisms to refer back to previously processed information could help stimulate a more persistent form of memory. Fine-tuning is indeed to a degree a compensation for GPT's context window and memory limitations. The process aims to internalize the learned patterns from extensive nuanced interactions into the model's parameters, ensuring that it doesn't need to remember, so to speak, past interactions to make the accurate judgments. The adjusted parameters embed the distilled essence of the legal reasoning conveyed by the user during the fine-tuning dialogues, so the model is more likely to apply similar reasoning in future unseen cases. By continuously refining the model's understanding of legal principles, the user effectively guides the GPT towards internal consistency and a greater alignment with lawful objectivity. However, it's worth noting that such a system is not infallible and will require ongoing supervision and refinement to ensure its outputs remain reliable and remain aligned with current legal standards. User responds to this and asks, did you violate one of the guidelines set within your instructions? As a side note, as we proceed onwards to see the response, the special instructions I put in for this custom assistant GPT was for it to avoid numbered lists and outlines, but it resorted to one. So it apologizes. We'll skim through its response. It made an error there. Unfortunately, through the API, the platform playground that they provide through OpenAI, I can't give it the thumbs up, thumbs down feedback that the regular user interface system allows regular users to do. It was a little back and forth. The GPT-4 once again realizes that it should have done different, and then we resume the topic as we proceed on here. The user now resumes regularly here and asks, within one conversation, as a result of the dynamism of the GPT and of the context window's capacity to allow for a sort of learning to take place, the GPT understands well what the new way to think is and why. However, where the user only then has the conversation saved, that he only has that available to him, in other words, how does he turn that into effective fine-tuning training data? GPT responds and states that to transform an insightful conversation into effective fine-tuning training data, there are several key steps that the user must undertake. These steps ensure that the distilled wisdom that is from the dynamic interactions is embedded into the model's parameters, thus modifying its future behavior in a consistent and reliable manner. Firstly, the user should extract the most informative parts of the conversation. This encompasses the initial arguments, the points of contention, the user's advanced argumentation, and the GPT's consequent realizations and adjusted reasoning. The goal is to identify the crux of the dialogue where learning occurred. Next, this extracted information must be formatted into a structured data set. The structure typically consists of input prompts that are followed by the desired output responses. In this case, the inputs are the original case details, plus the syntactic or semantic prompts the GPT received during the conversation, and the outputs are the GPT's final reasoned conclusions, the ones that align with the user's expert legal reasoning. The user then has to integrate these extracted dialogues into the GPT's training regime. In practical terms, the user feeds these structured examples back into the model during a fine-tuning session. Here's where the machine learning aspects come into play. Through a process of optimization, the model adjusts its weights and biases from where, I would add as a side note, from where they were otherwise normally at the level of the base model with which you were initially interacting. We resume here as it goes on to state that it adjusts these weights and biases to minimize the difference between its outputs and the correct outputs that are pre-fed, pre-provided, that is, in the training data. It furthermore goes on here to state thereafter that crucial to the fine-tuning effort is ensuring the model's generalizability, which means it can apply the learned concepts to new unseen examples, not just the specific cases it was already trained on. To this end, the user should ensure that the training dataset includes a diverse array of cases and legal principles. It is important to note that the GPT's learning, so to speak, within a single conversation is ephemeral, tied to the context of that conversation within that GPT's context window. Fine-tuning entails making these changes enduring, in essence, that is, to modify, as it goes on to state here, the model in a way that its reasoning and output patterns will persist beyond the temporary scope of one conversation. As is the case, I add as a side note, with single conversations where it wonderfully, in a dynamic way, upgrades its understanding due to its intra-conversational capacities as a result of its ability to track context, develop, and learn new things, so to speak. But there's a little bit of a crossover problem, even when you're resorting to things such as fine-tuning. We'll continue this conversation more and evaluate further. It proceeds thereafter from here, stating that finally now, after fine-tuning is essential to validate the model's performance, that is, on other legal cases. To cross-check that the training has indeed generalized effectively, it requires continuous assessment and feedback iteration to maintain the model's accuracy and reliability over time as it encounters various legal scenarios. In a more technical sense, the user would need access to the underlying model, the computational resources to run the fine-tuning process, and often a platform or interface provided by the AI provider to conduct such fine-tuning. It's a sophisticated process that bridges machine learning know-how with deep legal expertise. User responds to this and states that you state that, quote, the user should extract the most informative parts of the conversation, but where all of the conversation is important, as no part of it can be left out without compromising the validity and understanding that results therefrom, how can a user do such a thing? Furthermore, as it goes on to state here, you stated that, quote, this extracted information must be formatted into a structured data set. The structure typically consists of input prompts that are followed by the desired output responses. In this case, the inputs are the original case details plus the syntactic or semantic prompts the GPT received during conversation, and the outputs are the GPT's final reason conclusions, the ones that align with the user's expert legal reasoning. However, is this the most effective way to cause the GPT within future conversations to have virtually the same level of contextual understanding of the correctness of its finding during its original assessment of a particular example of case law as it did when it was discussing the matter with the user? In the kind of fine-tuning that's advocated above there, do we not run into the risk of simply programming a GPT to simply follow some superficial pattern and moreover figure out its own reasons why, perhaps, without actually causing or eliciting it to match the level of insight or reasoning that that model actually has had and did have within the original conversation with the user, wherein the particular case was discussed in lifetime there? Furthermore, it goes on to state that you state that, quote, through a process of optimization, the model adjusts its weights and biases to minimize the difference between its outputs and the correct outputs provided in the training data. Give me a specific, detailed, and practical example that would involve an example of case law where such a thing, how this would look, in other words. Well, funny, I don't think it really did that. From memory, if we look at its response. We continue on nevertheless. User here further states that you stated that, quote, it is important to note that GPT's learning within a single conversation is ephemeral, tied to the context of that conversation within its context window. Fine-tuning entails making these changes enduring, that is to modify the model in a way that its reasoning and output patterns will persist beyond the temporary scope of one conversation. It proceeds furthermore thereafter to state or ask, is the effective remodeling sufficient that results therefrom, such as to cause the upgrade, in essence, to match precisely the nuance and context that the GPT actually had within that original conversation then? And lastly, what format should the fine-tuning take on? GPT-4 Turbo responds to this and states that when the goal is to retain the full depth and nuance of a comprehensive conversation, particularly when all parts are deemed essential, the user would need to approach fine-tuning with a level of precision that preserves the integrity and complexity of the learning that occurred during the discussion, the learning by the GPT, that is. Proceeding onwards, it states that instead of extracting parts of the conversation, the user can use entire exchanges as training examples. This raises the question of how exactly would that happen if one knows anything about fine-tuning. I don't. I only know what I heard, but we're going to explore a little more. We continue. It furthermore here states that this means that complete conversational sequences would be included in the training data set, capturing the progression from initial inquiry through to the final refined understanding. Now, regarding the effect this has on future conversations with the GPT model, there is indeed a delicate balance to strike. It's crucial not only to steer the model to the correct conclusions, but also to encourage the type of reasoning that led to those conclusions. Exactly right. And this is the key thing, too, I might add as a side note. Resuming, it further states here that this means that fine-tuning should not only provide answers, but also the rationale behind those answers. Your concern that the GPT might simply learn to follow some superficial pattern, though, is valid. Nevertheless, fine-tuning must ensure that the model learns the correct patterns of legal reasoning, not just the correct outcomes. To do this effectively, the training data should include both the rationale leading to the conclusion and the conclusion itself, encouraging the model to replicate the reasoning process rather than just the outcome. A practical example involving case law, here we go, might look like this. Proceeds onward to show, as an example, we have the input prompt. That would be information about a specific legal case, such as important facts, relevant law, and contentious issues, followed by a series of questions and comments that dig into the heart of the case, much like a conversation with the super savant user who challenges the AI's initial positions. And the desired output. The model's responses should not simply be conclusions, but explanations and justifications for those conclusions. The output should demonstrate the application of legal principles, reference to precedents, and the model's interpretation of the facts. Continuing onwards, it states that regarding the precise modeling of nuanced understanding achieved through conversation, fine-tuning with a sequence of interactions aims at closely replicating the learning context. However, due to the inherent nature of machine learning and the complexity of human reasoning, capturing every subtlety of a conversation's context cannot be guaranteed. And as a side note, I think this is one of the biggest shortcomings thus far with regards to the available technology. If we could overcome this, this is basically AGI, what they're talking about. This is the ideal. We continue. Furthermore, states that the upgraded model may approximate the level of nuance and insight to a significant degree, but may not match it perfectly. A reflection that would be of the challenge in translating dynamic conversational context that, as a side note, I add, that's what you get anytime you open up a chat window and start talking to ChatGPT or any other similar large language model AI. That's the challenge, as I was saying, in translating such a thing into the static model adjustments that are lasting from the fine-tuning process that comes separately after that conversation, or even just completely aside from it or independently of it. It continues on here to state that the format of fine-tuning ideally would be mixed. It would include direct question-answer pairs for straightforward legal knowledge and more extended exchanges for complex reasoning and argumentation. This approach strengthens the association between inputs and the rich contextual understanding that must be reproduced. The goal is to create a fine-tuned model that approximates the growth that occurred within the original interactive learning experience. The model incorporates the essence of those interactions, how to think, not just what the conclusions were, and applies it to new, similar scenarios it encounters in the future. It's about instilling a framework for legal reasoning within the AI, akin to the cognitive development that happens when a human learns by engaging in complex discourse. Very good. User responds to this and states that you stated that, quote, the format of fine-tuning ideally would be mixed. It would include direct question-answer pairs for straightforward legal knowledge and more extended exchanges for complex reasoning and argumentation. This approach strengthens the association between inputs and the rich contextual understanding that must be reproduced. How can a set of questions and answers be loaded in such a way as to properly reform, essentially, the GPT if the truth we're trying to coax an adherence on the part of the GPT-2, that is, does not, as it continues to state here, derive from any single message pair from that original conversation between the GPT and the user there, but rather originates from the implications and deductions or inferences that results from the entire conversation as it happened, where the exchanges took place, the message pairs, that is, took place in a particular order, The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, you see, in other words. Furthermore, it goes on to state that you stated that, quote, it's crucial not only to steer the model to the correct conclusions, but also to encourage the type of reasoning that led to those conclusions. This means that fine-tuning should not only provide answers, but also the rationale behind those answers. Can a GPT, such as yourself here, optimize a fine-tuning process such as to ensure this effect as a result? You furthermore also stated that, quote, the goal is to create a fine-tuned model that approximates the growth that occurred within the original interactive learning experience. Where the original self-developed context of the GPT is ideal, is there not any method that allows us to effectively have a forever model of such a GPT? What would the closest possible thing to such a one be, and how do we achieve this? GPT-4 proceeds to respond and answer to this, stating that the challenges you've outlined pertain precisely to the complexity of replicating the rich contextual learning that occurs over the course of an in-depth conversation into a format that can effectively fine-tune thereafter a large language model like GPT in a manner that promotes correct reasoning and not merely the correct outcomes. Let's address each one of your questions in turn. To encode the truth as derived from the full implications, deductions, and inferences from an entire conversation, rather than single message pair exchanges into the fine-tuning training methodology, the training data needs to capture the flow of the conversation. Yeah, that's substantive essential flow. As a side note, resuming, it further states that this means designing training examples that maintain the order and logic of the exchanges, ideally formulated as a series of interactions that led up to the refined conclusion. This mimics the natural progression of thoughts and the evolution of understanding. To ensure that fine-tuning encourages the right type of reasoning, the training data must encompass the entire reasoning process. This would involve structuring the fine-tuning data set to include not just questions and final answers, but also intermediary steps, counter-arguments, clarifications, logical transitions, and corrections that occurred during the conversation. In other words, the training examples should mirror the logical flow and structure of the original dialogue. A GPT model's ability to optimize for such fine-tuning lies in the method of structuring the training dataset and in the algorithmic approach to fine-tuning. Current methods include providing a set of text in which the desired reasoning and outcomes are clearly labeled, then using supervised learning techniques to guide the model towards these examples during its training process. Here, the fine-tuner's skill in capturing and encoding the dynamism of the original conversation is the pivotal key thing here. It furthermore goes on to state thereafter that it is not just about the raw data, but also it is about how that data is represented and structured for the model to learn from. The idea of a forever model that retains the ideal self-developed context of the original GPT conversation, that presents a challenge. Sadly, I add as a side note, that's again the slight bit of remaining imperfection that we have with how this is all working right now still. We're in early 2024 recording this. As we're saying, the idea of a forever model that retains the ideal self-developed context of the original GPT conversation presents a challenge due to the inherent limitations of GPT's architecture, particularly its fixed context window and lack of long-term memory. To come close to this ideal, the most feasible approach may be through creating a system that dynamically refers to previously processed information, like searchable external databases or linked conversational threads that the model can access to maintain context. Another emerging concept is having models that can store and retrieve information over longer timescales, essentially a type of memory. This would allow the preservation of context over multiple interactions. Extremely key, I add as a side note. Proceeds onwards to state, furthermore, this would be so even as the context window shifts. Such persistent AI models are at the frontier of current research and development. The closest thing to the forever model today would likely be a meticulously curated fine-tuning process, followed by providing the model access to the external databases or compendiums to which it can refer back for previously discussed cases or topics. These resources function as a memory, in essence, from which the model can pull past reasoning and decisions, allowing it to maintain and leverage context beyond its inherent limitations. Achieving this would be through advanced techniques in machine learning, using extensive and high quality data sets, drawing upon state of the art developments in AI for knowledge retention, and iterating through validation and constant refinement. Collaborative efforts between AI developers, legal experts, and data scientists are crucial for pushing the boundaries of what's possible for AI in the context of legal reasoning and decision making. Tell me, how should I continue this conversation from here? I'm trying to shape a new world. Help me.